George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. We got a special guest on the program, Pastor Phil Turner of the Bethany Baptist Church in Syracuse, New York. And Pastor Turner, as a faith leader in this community, obviously you're on the front lines for a lot of the issues that come across our community. And one of those issues has to do with police recruitment, a concern that you have about how we diversify the police force. Funny you should be on the show today because we have already spoken to Mayor Ben Walsh, who had his say about police reform. But police reform doesn't happen without community. So, from your perspective, what needs to happen, and what are the steps you think need to take place for the citizens to feel like the police represents them?
Well, the first thing that we have to be concerned with is changing the face of law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, the face of law enforcement in this country has been European Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And, the depiction of that towards our community, it depicts an enemy. Our narrative in the African American community and law enforcement has been an adversarial one, and that they are the enemy and that we are the victims. And so, if you consider our perspective towards law enforcement to most people in African American community represent terrorists
Mm.
whose job is to keep African Americans terrorized.
Mm.
Historically, they have been cast as a force to keep, first of all, Black people under control, and secondly, in their place.
Mm-hmm.
So the communities that we live in, by and large, throughout the country, are engineered communities of aged out properties and of low income people, and all of that has been engineered. The discrimination in employment has helped to keep our people poor. Redlining has helped to keep us in certain areas, and now we are, as they say, if you want to hunt deer, you have to go to the woods. So, and the police have been raised to believe that all of the crime comes from those communities, and that their community is the community that they have to keep safe, and their job is to keep those people from ever coming to their communities, and to keep them under control. So we've got to change the narrative. When you and I came up, the heroes were all European Americans. Everybody from the Lone Ranger to Gunsmoke to every person that came through.
Father knows best before the
Father,
Cosby.
Father knows best.
Wait, Leave It to Beaver.
Leave it my three sons.
My three sons. We're
and
dating ourselves, Pastor.
But that's all right. But what I'm saying is I'm giving the historical piece on what good and purity is.
Mm-hmm.
And so people have been raised, and we know from what we've seen in the media coming up, that the face of crime is a face of a darker hue.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have law enforcement with the mindset that they've got to protect those communities. And whenever you hear any of these campaign slogans by politicians, the war on crime or the war on drugs, that has always been directed towards communities of color. That has not meant suburban neighborhoods where the majority of drugs are taken. That has not meant communities that are European American communities who, by and large, buy the most drugs. But it's always meant that you have to go in here, and that has to be beat down in the African American communities. The problem is that we have a socioeconomic issue that they're trying to arrest away.
Mm.
They're trying to arrest it away.
I see you.
Okay, so that if you're never going to be able to put up a social economic problem in jail, although you will keep jailing the people because they're victims of that community and that environment. But as a European American police officer told me years ago, he said, I don't understand why you guys aren't fighting to decriminalize street drugs. He says, because when you put a drug dealer in jail, he said, that's nothing more than a job opening.
Mm.
So that's and that's
Right.
an economy in our community. If you have poverty, you're going to have people gravitating towards ways to make money, and you're going to have people gravitating towards medication that will help them deal with their oppression. And
Hmm.
so that cycle has fed the penal system, and
Sure it has.
now we have mass incarceration
For
eh,
profit,
for profit. Okay,
right? I know Biden has done something about that, but still, right?
but that's largely made up of people of color.
Yeah.
All right, and so the data proves that the majority of drugs are consumed and bought in communities outside of the urban community. Okay, for you and I, the heroin epidemic began in the 60s in our community.
Yeah.
Now they're saying that there's a heroin epidemic as of late. But as you recall, and if anyone has ever watched that original Godfather movie, the war between the families is that the other families wanted to continue dealing drugs and taking the drugs into black communities because their feeling is that the black people didn't have souls,
Mm.
and it was okay for them to be addicted to heroin. Because we've never been able to get the drugs into our community, we don't have the economic power. We don't have the economic power to get drugs from South America, and Peru and Ecuador, and poppy plants and all of that from places like uh, uh, where's the war in the war that's going on now.
Tell me
Uh,
what. I'm drawing a
okay,
blank.
well, the war that's going in the so-called Middle East. Oh, places like
Oh,
Afghanistan, and
Afghanistan. Okay.
places like that where those kinds of plants grow. All right, we basically don't have the kind of money. We don't have the kind of resources to get those drugs from those places, from Vietnam and those type of places, to get them into our community. So even addiction has been engineered. And since it has been engineered, it makes it easy to put the weakest people in jail, because the guy who can get that from those places will never have to be standing on a corner. Okay, and then the person that's standing on the corner is standing there for financial reasons, but not only that, they are the weakest link in the chain. They don't have the legal effort to get themselves out of incarceration. They can't defend themselves. They're not wealthy. They don't have a team of lawyers. So it's very easy to put them in jail. Okay, and so people think, and the society has been trained to think that we got to get those drug dealers off the street, when that can never ever stop drugs from getting to our communities. All right, all it is a way to justify putting thousands of people in jail. And so now we know that that's the profit system. Now it's and the fodder for that system is African American people, mostly men,
Mhm.
African American and Latino men.
So we changed that how?
Well, we changed that by beginning, and this is what I've said to the police chief. I've said this in meetings with the mayor and others, that you begin to change the narrative and the image of what the police look like in our community.
Sure.
Right. And then, and I was in a conversation the other day with the chief, I and some other pastors, and the chief made this point, and I believe that he's right. And that is, if you are going to change the face of law enforcement, it has to be a community effort.
Mm.
I have been asking this question for years, and it always comes up that they can't find the minority applicants. They can't pass the
Civil
rigorous
service. Hmm.
process and all of
Hmm.
that. And I think that anyone who's mentored can get through anything.
Yeah.
If you have a guru who's telling you and teaching you and coaching you at every level, you can get through it.
And we should also say, look, if we're inventors, scientists, molecular, chemical, astro, we're doing all of these things. Surely we can
Yeah.
do. We can pass a civil service exam. Uh,
Well, well, here's what you and I know. We know that they're good families raising good human beings
yeah.
who, if they felt differently about law enforcement, would probably, because it's an honorable profession,
Right.
that you are protecting the people, that you are guarding the people's safety, that
Oh,
you are upholding the laws of the land that makes life in America livable.
as someone who lives and breathes and who lives amongst the people, and I think that's
Yes,
another challenge that the mayor pointed out, that if you uh, because people aren't necessarily living amongst, right, you can
yes, yes,
it means that there's the potential for othering, right? I don't
yes,
live there, so therefore, right?
yeah.
So
Well, and then the result of that is that it has led to disaster. That
mhm.
you have people policing people that they have no connection with. They've never had any exposure to that kind of environment. In fact, their upbringing has been that these people are bad. We need to keep them from moving to our neighborhood. And so you come on the job with a deficit in that you don't even identify with the people that you're policing. All right. I had some incidents coming up. I remember there was a black police officer who knew my family, and I was in a place that was known for some rough kind of
You ain't had
goings
no
on.
business being there. You ain't no business being there.
Exactly, George. So here's what happened. You hit the nail on the head. The police officer said to me, "Phil, does your father know you're over here?"
Uh-huh.
He didn't have to throw me on the ground. He didn't have to frisk me. He didn't have to tell me to shut up. And he told me that. And guess what I did? I went home
You got yourself out of there.
because I knew he knew my parents.
And that's right.
And this is what goes on in suburban neighborhoods. George, I saw your son down in such and such a place. Now I want you to talk to him because that's a bad crowd down there, and I don't want to have to take him in. Don't worry, Mac, I got it.
Right. It's almost to the we're talking Pastor Phil Turner, pastor Bethany Baptist Church, about ways to get the police force in our community, the city of Syracuse in particular, more diverse, get more black and brown folks on the force, because the belief is that will make a difference in policing in our community. I think that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. And George, if you pay attention to what we have been experiencing in our growth and development, is that we've seen very few depictions of black folks protecting other people.
Mm.
All right, we don't have that image in our head, so we need to change the narrative.
Hmm.
Okay, how just lately we've been seeing, black people be law enforcers in the movies,
Well,
beating up and shooting white folk,
although
and
what,
arresting white people.
but one of the more powerful images of recent history is the brother who who protected the Capitol.
Yeah,
What's his name? Was it Eugene? I think that's his name.
I
Goodwin?
think
Is
that
that
was I've forgotten the last name, but his story
right?
was very gripping. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then as of late, we've had some movies. I forgot what was the one where the guy was a black ranger or something, and his descendant from the Oklahoma burning
Mm-hmm.
of the town in Oklahoma that was known as the Black Wall Street, where they went in and destroyed it and burned it down, and there was a series on.
Right.
In fact, the King lady,
Oh,
uh,
the Watchmen.
a Watchman,
Yes.
where
Yes.
the person who was
Regina
protecting,
King. Yeah.
yes, where the person who was protecting the people and watching over them and making sure that justice took place was black.
Mm.
Okay, so we need to have a black Lone Ranger, and we need to
I,
have
but
more of a black face in the Avengers.
Pastor,
And
you probably wait. Can I just stop for a minute? You just decoded that series for me. Now I could go back and watch it because I kept getting stuck on episode 3, and
yes,
I could go back and watch. You just gave me the clue to that
yeah.
series. It was a very
So we
powerful
have to,
series.
yes, it is, and we have to start painting a different image for our young people while they are still young.
Mm-hmm.
That you're needed to protect people.
Yeah.
That your community needs you need to be a hero,
Mm-hmm.
instead of somebody who's always running from the police. I mean,
Mm.
we have a narrative now where a black man can't even run in public.
Mm.
Armand
Or
Arbery, who was
walk,
actually,
or eat, or be on the phone, or swim, or you
you know,
name it, right?
And so here also is the narrative, even going back, and all of the areas of our society are complicit.
Right.
The government, the church,
Mm-hmm.
the system has had complicity in maintaining a caste system, and that the idea is to set a caste for people who are of darker hue. There really isn't any white people. White was fabricated as a way of castigating anybody who wasn't of a European descent. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that was an American creation, and so you had, I don't know if you know anything about the movie Birth of a Nation.
Oh, absolutely. I studied it in school. I
Okay,
know. I know everything about that movie. Yes.
where President Woodrow Wilson premiered the movie in the White House.
Yes, he did. He
That
said it
they
was, his quote was, it was like history with lightning.
Right. And so the depiction of that movie is that the country was in total disarray and in chaos because African Americans were governing the country. And they depicted, senators and congressmen, while they are sitting in the Senate and sitting in Congress with their feet up on the desk and sipping on bottles of liquor. And the biggest danger to white women was that they were being hunted down and assaulted by a black man, and the only way that she could escape is she would rather jump off of a cliff than to be molested by a black. So this image of evil coming from people of darker hues has been instilled in the nation. We've got to change that narrative so our young people can begin to see the honor in being a protector of the people,
Mm.
where they can begin to see the honor of having the
Yes.
responsibility of
Because
keeping the people safe.
right, because right now the honor is protecting the perpetrator
Yes.
in some quarters. We're not
Yes.
saying it's all about everybody, but in some places that is there. I like how you phrase that, the honor in protecting the community,
Yes.
protecting our parents, protecting
Yes.
our grandmothers and our aunties and our uncles and our people who are. It's an honor to be an elder in the community.
And look at the difference in perspective. That when you talk to a European American about when they hear the term defunding the police, their first thought is that, oh my God, they protect us. All right. But when you say that to a person, of a darker hue, that person says, well, some of that money could go towards, you know, uh, 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 building up a better education system in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
So less people would have to be
Right.
incarcerated.
Right.
Why don't we deal with the socio-economic problem instead of just putting everybody in jail? Because the idea of over-policing is the effort to try to arrest a socio-economic problem. Put it in jail as if that can stop it.
Yeah.
Okay. But poverty, I don't care how many people you have in jail, poverty is still hard on people.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Well,
poverty has some relatives. Crime is a relative to poverty. Violence is a relative to poverty. All that condition depicts the
and
behavior
then
of the people.
and then guess what? And then throw a pandemic on top of all of that.
Okay.
And
As we
okay, and throw a pandemic on top of that.
on
And see
top
what
of
you
that,
get
as we
on
have
top of
always
that. Right?
as we have always known, if America has a cold, the black community has what?
A pneumonia.
Pneumonia. Okay. I ain't even got, you can finish that for me. All right. We already know that. Okay.
Right. But and part of it too, Pastor, is our failure to address the original pandemic, right? Which was
Yes.
racism and
Yes. In the
in
beginning.
this country, right? And it's funny because a short story. It's real. Basically, I had a conversation. I want to make it this point. I had a conversation while I was away, and there was a gentleman who was a little bit older than me, but in the same age category, an age decade. Let me put it that way, right? 60s, and so it's very interesting because two things that he said that struck me. He was talking about the George Floyd's issue. First thing he said was, well, nobody's looking at the original crime, one. And two, he said this, right? He said, Well, remember after you first got your freedom in this country, if you were being abused so much, why didn't they go back? Oh, so you mean just go back to Africa, right? I said,
Hmm.
so we had that. So now let me give you the icing on that cake.
Hmm.
This is a man whose children, whose
Hmm.
grandchildren, excuse me, are black, right? So when you talk, when you hear people of European descent talking about, well, my sister or my wife or something like that, uh, it really doesn't make a difference because he still he has these attitudes. Basically, you know what he said to me? He says, "How come rich white guys can't have a club where we just be together and why would you this is a conversation, it's a real life conversation." And so I
Hmm.
want people to think that this is not, and this was a nice guy,
Right,
right? Who
right,
was
right.
saying, why would you want to be a part of my club, right?
Yes,
what what good is that for you? Why
yeah.
can't I just have a club where I can just be around other rich white guys and we just enjoy ourselves? But what I'm
What do
basically saying,
what,
these are, now we had a conversation, but I'm just saying
yeah,
these are some of the headlines from his point of view
yeah.
as a man whose daughter-in-law is
Hmm.
black,
Yeah.
right? Whose
And
grandchildren, yeah.
yeah.
And so
So what he's expressing is why a person who propagates division and superiority, a person like that in the person of Donald Trump can get 70 million votes.
exactly. And I
That's what
and
he's expressing, and because what Trump is saying is we got to take America back to the way it was when
when
we had a clear cut when we had a clear cut superiority, when black people knew their place, when we had Jim Crow, y'all stayed over here, we stayed over there, and when Trump says to make America great again, that's what he said. That's what he's really saying. Let's go back to when everybody was comfortable and we didn't have all these racial issues.
Well, oh, I'll put it in contemporary terms. Let's go back to when we had our foot on their neck.
Exactly, exactly. And here's why by the time the emancipation took place, okay, the investment on the part of black people was too great for us to leave now, because we were the piece of the puzzle that had made America great. You had 13 fledgling colonies, and one day, in 1619, they brought a boatload of slaves into Jamestown, Virginia. All of a sudden, America began to be wealthy. Cotton became the number one import product, and America was producing 60% of the world's cotton. People were getting rich. Okay, even Wall Street was formed on the business that came from slave trade. So they had to come up with insurance companies, and the major educational institutions in this country was funded by money that came from slave trade. I'm talking about every Ivy League school in the country
Right.
had people on their board.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book called Ebony and Ivy, and it talks about
Mm.
how the slave
Mm.
trade funded,
Wow.
these institutions like
Mm-hmm.
Harvard and Princeton and Brown and Dartmouth and Stanford, and all these schools that are Ivy League schools grew on the back of the slave trade. So since we had such a major role in making, and even the independence, when America fought for independence, when Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and all these people
Mm-hmm.
were very wealthy because they owned slaves. And the idea of freeing slavery, when slavery began to look negative to England, and England was abolishing all slavery, that's when the Americans said, okay, we got to break off from England because we need to keep our slaves who are making us rich.
Right.
Okay, so all of a sudden they had the clout and the courage to separate from the mother country. They were protecting their wealth.
Well, we done went through history, but let's get back to
Let's
no.
get
I
back to okay. I
I
hate to deviate. I'm sorry,
nah,
man.
nah. You know what? It's all relevant
Yeah,
because here we are now,
yeah.
and you raise this idea of protecting and serving the community, but what does that community look like, and who gets to be protected? protected, right? Because we
Yeah.
know one of the least protected persons in the country is Black women, right? So we're
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
about our communities. So, Pastor, make your plea for organizations, community groups, etc., to help protect our community and get some of us, well, you and I are past our prime for this, but to get those who can
Yeah.
to become part of law enforcement. We had Elliot Boyce on not too long ago, who's a state trooper,
She's the
32
truth.
years,
I know, brother Boyce. Yes.
right,
Amen.
32 years on the force. And
Yeah.
so, or more, I believe. And we do need, he get this number. He says out of 4,000 troopers, there's about 400
Hmm.
officers of color, right?
Yeah.
So, so we have an opportunity, Pastor. I think that's why you wanted to come on, and
Absolutely.
you wanted to make it plain that we got to be part of the solution.
Well, and I also want to encourage young men and women to pursue a career in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it looks very unpopular right now just because of the image, the adversarial image of police being terrorists in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be, until we are starting to police ourselves and the people who are policing us identify with us,
Yes.
all right, and see us as human beings who have God-fearing, honorable families, who want the same thing for their children that everybody else wants. And then what is not projected in the modern day society is that Black people don't like law and order. We do.
Yeah.
We want law and order in our community as well. So we want
Just like everybody else.
just like everybody else. So we need good policing, just like everyone else. And we shouldn't be the target of the police, but we should be the very thing that the police are protecting and
Mm-hmm.
helping to maintain decency and decorum in our community. And so we need to encourage our young people that this is an honorable position and that you can be a part of the remedy. We need some courageous young Black people
Mm.
like a Jackie Robinson who broke the color barrier. And don't think that he didn't go through. Now, when they get in the police department, they're gonna have to go through some mess.
Oh
But
yeah.
they've got to be courageous.
Yeah.
You know, like the brother, what's his name? Lloyd, Earl Lloyd. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that broke the color line in the
In
NBA.
the NBA.
You know how much flack they took from crowds and stuff like that? Well, in these predominantly white male institutions, when our people go into them, they're going to have to go through a lot of mess. But if they're strong, they can set the standard. They can cause other people to have the desire to protect their community. I was talking the other day with Chief Buckner, who was explaining how there were no people in positions of authority in the police department, and that what he had came into was an institution where even if there were people of color in it, they hadn't been able to progress. And so I can only imagine what Chief Fowler was dealing with. I can only imagine what Chief Dennis Duval was
But
dealing with.
well, doesn't the chief get to appoint deputy chiefs?
He does, but remember this now, the institution is old. He just got there.
Okay. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. You know what came to mind?
Yeah.
Coming to America and the scene where Madge Sinclair is talking about the because you had to select, your bride was selected, and
Yeah.
he said, "Well, that's tradition." He said, "Well, you the king, aren't you? You the chief, aren't you?"
Well, but the truth is that an African American chief is still in a sense in shackles.
Well,
Okay. And
mm,
and we have to understand that America demonstrated that in their vitriol against
mhm.
Obama as president. All
Yeah,
right.
I that's the image that came to mind. Like Obama even didn't have the same license, you know, the
Well,
45
imagine it.
didn't.
Well,
uh,
imagine it. Would Obama be president if he had multiple wives with children from various other wives, if he had said publicly that he molested women by grabbing their private parts and that they liked it?
Mm-hmm.
If he had a history of not paying people for the work that they did for him, if he had had a number of businesses that had gone under, because of bad management, and if he
Or
had,
if Michelle had posed nude.
right, okay, so we obviously have a double standard, okay, and here's Obama with a Harvard degree, with a wife with a Harvard degree. Now imagine what Michelle had to go through, and the two of them had to go through. Yes, they were president and first lady, but it certainly was not without a battle.
Well, you know what? I got the book, so I tell you, I'm reading. But yeah, that's an interview I'm looking forward to having at some point. Well, Pastor, I think we're going to have to take it from this point. Last
Amen.
word on what are you encouraging? Just one more time, take the test. We need folks to take the test. We need them to
So,
become officers.
so here's what we have to contend with, because so many of our young people have already been entrapped by the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find a young African American, especially a male, who hasn't had some history with law enforcement.
Right.
And the prediction is that, by the year, it used to be 2020, and I think it is now, that they said every African American male adult, out of every five, three of them will all have had some history with law enforcement, and that they will have a record. So we have to take those who have been able to survive. They don't have any criminal record, even though they are a target, but they have managed to not have a criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
They have not been overcome by drugs and alcohol, and they can get through the process. And they
Mm-hmm.
need to understand that we need some courageous people to break that line, to
Yeah.
go in there, so that we don't have four police officers standing by while a black man is being killed. That
And
at least one of those brothers would say, "Hey man, I know George. George ain't no problem." And not to George. I'm talking about this George ain't no. I know you ain't no, but I'm talking about George Floyd.
no, I
Somebody.
understand. No, yeah.
And you had civilians standing there saying
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is wrong. But imagine if there had been one of the police officers
Mm-hmm.
who had enforced the concept of justice at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
who would have said at least once, "Yo, man, I don't think you have to do that." All he
Mm-hmm.
had to say, man, is that ain't even necessary. Matter of fact, I
Right.
know him. Let me handle it. I know George.
That would have been good.
That would have been good.
All right, Pastor Phil Turner, Bethany Baptist Church. Turner Baptist preacher loose, and know what you're gonna get. But we
Amen.
love. Hey, that's my pastor, by the way. Just FYI,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
just
yeah.
just just
Listen,
just for the record,
I'm
just for the
blessed.
record, just for the
I'm
record.
blessed. I'm blessed to have members like George.
Well, we
This is a
appreciate
blessing.
that. Listen, our family's been blessed, and certainly we appreciate the work you're doing. So listen, you heard the plea. If you are a young person or you know of a young person, if you're listening to Under the Sound of Our Voices, organizations, groups, community, let's change the face of law enforcement, or at least sprinkle some more folks in there who represent the community, who are going to be about protecting and serving in a way that is going to uplift our community.
Yes.
This is what we expected. This is what we deserve. Uh,
Help us to destroy the myth that you can't find honorable young black men and women. That's
amen.
a myth. That's a myth.
It's a
And we need to encourage them that they can be a part of the change.
yes.
Okay. And that it's honorable to protect your community.
With that, Pastor Phil Turner, Bethany Baptist Church, Inspiration for the Nation.
Peace, George. I love you, brother.
Love you back.